Here's the vibe for this week. We're living in an environment where reality testing has become socially expensive. Not hard, expensive. Because the question isn't, is this true, as much as what happens to me if I say it isn't? And once a story starts paying out, attention, belonging, status, people stop defending facts and start defending membership. So today, we're going to talk about how incentives and reinforcement loops can make obviously shaky narratives feel safer than reality. This is Shrink the Nation. Let's go.
This is Shrink the Nation, a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably holding a drink and definitely holding a thought. The views expressed here are ours alone. They do not represent our employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or most emphatically, our families. They've been very clear about that. This show is for education and entertainment only. Nothing you hear is medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. We're clinicians, not your clinicians. If something we say stirs you up, that's not a crisis, that's a journal entry, or an email sent politely. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers on the internet. And if you are in real distress, please reach out to a professional who can actually help you.
Hey, I'm David. I've got my 20 plus in the military. I'm a board certified psychiatrist. Tonight, I'm not drinking anything. I just got some water here. I'm sorry.
Just
I'm
just
sorry.
some water.
I want to sleep later, and
Yeah.
alcohol does not allow for a good quality sleep. But last night, I got a 99 score with my watch, and I want to keep that up because I feel pretty good.
Yeah, it's
Like,
amazing what sleep will do for you.
yeah.
Last night I did not get a 99.
You look like hell.
Traveling and I've been in parts unknown for a few days, and I don't sleep well when I'm traveling. But yeah, it's Rob. I've got my 26 in psychiatry and 30 in the military, and took a week off, and here we are yet again to talk.
Not feeling refreshed whatsoever. You just didn't take that week and make good use of it, Robbie.
As life, man, life's got some responsibilities.
The entire couple of weeks that we weren't doing this, I was doom scrolling the internet and looking at
Crazy shit.
ridiculousness. Yeah. I want to start off talking about a story that's been kind of floating around. There's a young woman, attractive, who is an Instagram model that is MAGA and Army.
Yeah.
And she's been garnering a lot of attention lately.
What's her name? Jennifer?
It's Jessica Foster, I believe.
Of course it is. Jessica Foster.
Yeah, it's Jessica Foster. And she has been attracting a lot of MAGA people, mainly because she posts a lot of pictures with Donald Trump doing various things with the army. And what's interesting about her is that she's not real.
She doesn't exist. Yeah, that does
Yeah.
make it interesting.
She has had a pretty impressive career.
She's a staff sergeant.
She's got a hero stack of medals on her mini dressed out uniform. I mean, there are generals, I think, walking around with maybe not as impressive ribbon stacks that she is.
It's an impressive one, but it's not really. When you actually look at it, it makes no sense. Now, I'm going to give it to the AI that so when you look at a stack of medals, the top medals tend to be awards. The middle medals tend to be service, such as like Iraq service, Afghanistan service, whatever. And then the bottom tend to be training type ribbons. And they kind of hit it, but there's some inconsistencies when you really look at it. There's some repetition. There's some devices on there that don't make any sense. They also fucked up. She's got U.S. Army on her name tag instead of her name.
It's her first name on her name tag.
On a different picture, it says Jessica. Yeah.
And she's also got this skin tight shirt with her midriff visible, posing with Donald Trump.
And then there's one in her pink and green uniforms, the new green dress uniform, AGSU, where she's got a mini skirt on that damn near shows her hoo-ha.
I'm looking at one where she's sitting on kind of midships on a destroyer, it looks like.
She gets around, man. She's all service.
She's got the airborne patch on as well. So
Yeah.
always really impressive. But she spends a lot of time with Donald Trump.
Another thing is on her AGSU's, her Army Green Service uniform, there's some device on her shoulder. And for an enlisted soldier, there are no devices on the shoulder for those uniforms. It's not bad. It's impressive, actually, what they pulled off. It would stand probably most people's smell test if they weren't real familiar with these uniforms. It didn't catch my eye. I tell you what caught my eye was the miniskirt. I'm like, I don't think that's regulation. So, having been put in the position of calling people out when they're out of regulation for dress, I'm always a little hesitant because, I don't memorize that shit. I know what looks right for, a man my rank. But anyway, it did pique my interest. Now, here's what's interesting is that it caught the eye of what she's got 100,000 followers, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're not here to, I guess, talk about fake influencers on the internet. We're here to kind of talk about the psychology behind
Hmm.
why 100,000 people are looking at this to that extent, where they're fans of it, they're liking it. And I think a lot of people were actually reaching out and trying to get her to respond when it
Yeah.
was
You
clearly,
never you never respond to me.
yeah. I mean, I wrote to her all the time, Robbie. She never said anything back. I was very offended.
You know, here's the other thing. She's got I don't know, OnlyFans or fans only. I never get that right. One's for football and one's for porn. And I don't know which one's which.
Or you don't.
She's got, well, interestingly, you just type in both and you eventually get
You
to
get
where
them
you
both.
want to go. One wants you to bet and one wants you to pay for other things. Or no, she's on FanView.
Oh, is it not OnlyFans? I don't know
Right.
what it was. I thought it was OnlyFans, but it's foot fetish photos apparently.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing that's in there, which is definitely out of regs. Yeah, that's
Well, I guess it wouldn't. I guess it wouldn't matter. I don't know, but I have this philosophical question: if a fan of MAGA is masturbating to a picture of Jessica Foster and Donald Trump because she's not real, is
mhm.
it technically just them masturbating to a picture of Donald Trump?
I like how you framed it as philosophical.
I guess I was thinking of like if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's around to hear it, doesn't make a
Yeah,
sound. If a MAGA fan masturbates to a picture of a girl that doesn't exist that also has Trump in it,
yeah. I don't know, but I'll tell you what, it was interesting to me that in doing a little bit of research on this, it does seem like the prevailing attack on it was look what MAGA fans like. But there is no evidence that the 100,000 people that follow her are MAGA. She just has 100,000 followers, which, it is an attractive woman. She's young and she's blonde. What would you put her at? 24 maybe ish?
too young. Too young, I think is what I would put her.
Well, too
But
young.
apparently, based off of when she was created, she's like 6 months old. So,
She's 6 months old,
yeah.
which makes it even creepier. But no,
There
no,
you go. Now it's pedophilia.
right. I look at her and I think, oh, she's 24, 25, something like that. And, she's young, she's blonde. I think that in and of itself was probably enough to get a certain number of individuals to follow her. But when you factor in young blonde in uniform, I think the uniform actually gives a certain set of permissions to have certain feelings toward this young lady, or at least adjust your feelings in a way that ends up becoming psychologically acceptable, even though they come from a place that maybe for some of these folks not exactly acceptable. And that's what actually ended up fascinating because we have no evidence to support that this was predominantly a MAGA population supporting her, following her, wanting to see her feet.
No, just a bunch of gross people wanting to see her feet. Yeah. MAGA, not MAGA, men that want to look at, or women. There might be women out there.
And I'm
I'm
sure
not here to,
some women following her to
I'm
see
sure.
her feet.
I think it's the pro MAGA messaging that goes with her profile, and I think that's the part that people probably are looking at when they suggest that it's MAGA. Kind of brings into this idea. I don't want to say that this is somebody who is trying to push the MAGA narrative, but it does look like it's somebody who is targeting an attractive young woman, adding in the military, adding in pro MAGA messaging, and then to draw in a specific type of eyes, and then shunting that over to paid content where they can make money. So I mean, it's a money making. It's just doing it through a very different channel.
So I went to Instagram. I have a shadow account on Instagram so that I can, when someone forwards me a
So they can look
stupid
at your
video.
feet.
Well, no, I have nothing posted. Well, nothing but feet. I have
Sure.
nothing
Yeah.
but
There you
feet.
go.
Yeah. My feet. Who in the hell wants to look at mine though?
God, 30 years in
Yeah,
boots. Oh,
exactly.
God. Oh,
Exactly.
awful.
I don't have
Oh,
great feet.
probably look homeless. Your feet probably look like they belong to somebody who
You
lives
know,
under a bridge.
ashy. That's uh
Oh, God. People are gagging right now. Imagining your feet,
yeah.
that one weird little
Um
fucking toenail sticking out.
or toe that just goes in the wrong direction there. What are you doing there, buddy? It's like one eye hunting and one eye fishing. Off it goes. So I did look at the site, and the creator of that site did end up posting a video in which how he makes her, how he does this. It says, "Yeah, I realize nobody's clicking on me any longer. This is how I did it." And he shows his process for creating these videos. Pretty complex. I mean, he has to animate it. It's not totally AI generated, so he's doing some magic on his end. What was interesting to me is he had a really thick Indian accent. Indian as in from India, the country. So he selected the MAGA population specifically. He's not a part of that. He wasn't pushing the agenda. He selected a MAGA population. He selected a military target, and it's ridiculous if you actually look at the photos, which I did. I'll admit I was curious. Like one picture is with Trump, Zelensky, and her. The next picture is Trump and Putin and her. The next picture is her in front of an F-22. The next picture is her on a destroyer. The next picture is her in Greenland.
Impressive career.
Yeah, 30 years in and around the army. I promise you, I've not been to every hot spot. Just it never just doesn't work out that way. I have ended up in hot spots at times, totally random, totally by accident, totally didn't like it. But at any rate, he targeted this population. Psychologically, why? What was his thought process?
Trying to get money, obviously. He wasn't, and it doesn't look like he was doing it for a
Oh yeah.
political purpose. He wasn't trying to get
No.
money for politics. Just he saw a population that would go for it. I mean, he very specifically picked things that would kind of shut down the alarm bells of somebody, and it was surprisingly effective. We need to figure out how to do this, Robbie. And for those of you who haven't seen Robbie, he is a beautiful 24-year-old something
I'm
woman, very
with her.
stacked. He wears a lot of tight shirts.
I do.
Robbie's
I do.
gorgeous. Yeah, beautiful woman.
Yeah, I'm
He
a
is.
beautiful woman with, really gorgeous feet.
Except
Uh,
that one toe.
you just don't look at it. Don't look at it.
Hard not to look at it, Robbie.
Yeah. No, you just put one hand over an eye. You're good.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, just ignore it. No, he targeted his population. Apparently, my sense is at least that he had the idea that these are vehement, really passionate group. We'll put it that way. They're a passionate group, and that if he framed this young lady and swathed her in the flag, he would get more attention, or she, it, whatever you call this now, would get more attention, which is interesting to me because really what we're talking about, I mean, fundamentally, no one can look at those pictures and not see the sexuality to it. But sexuality is not that simple, it's not that straightforward. And not everyone's that comfortable with sexuality. So the fact that he swathed her in the flag, put her in uniform, and then had, and I did look at some of the comments. They did seem to be from older men, mostly. And these older men were just drooling over her as a service member. So the service member piece was important to them. Look at her earning every one of those stripes, and she's smoking hot. So there is something there psychologically that made the sexuality safe for a subset of individuals. Now, have I assessed the 100,000 followers plus? No, I do not know. I did a random sampling and probably zoned in on the clearly like old dude phraseology that drew my attention. But, this guy, I'm gonna give him credit. He picked blonde, smoking hot, 24, 25, put her in uniform, made her a goddamn hero. She's even got a CIB. She's got a combat infantry badge. Like, she's 24 years old. She's got a
Yeah.
combat infantry badge. Where have you been in combat in the last, 6 years? No, that ain't happening. But she's got a CIB, and she's airborne. She's like,
Sometimes.
yeah, she's like Rambo with lingerie, with
Yeah.
fishnets.
I mean, I think that's a huge part of it. Yes. But she was also, really pushing forth a MAGA perspective. I mean, she was touting that belief. And if we, just a few days ago, there was a poll that showed that 100% of MAGA supporters, 100% of MAGA
Wait,
is one
100%.
100% of MAGA is supportive of Donald Trump. 100%.
Oh,
Those are not
what
normal
poll was
numbers.
this?
There was a CNN poll
100%.
on Wednesday after the war in Iran had entered its third week.
Ugh.
There was a poll that found 100% of self identified MAGA voters supported Donald Trump and 0% disapproved. That is the level of cognitive dissonance that goes into 100%. I don't know that there's ever been a time that any other president, and there have been beloved presidents who had gotten 100% of the support from their base.
I know other leaders in history that have received that.
Right. Yes. But what other presidents? And that
I think
it's
his
an
title
off-putting
was
number.
president, wasn't it? Wasn't Hitler's title president?
Exactly. I do think that plays a role in the popularity. And part of why it was easy to overlook some of the obvious false things. I mean, what staff sergeant is posing with the president
None,
in the Oval
0.
Office whilst wearing half their uniform?
Yep, 0.
I mean, it doesn't happen. But when you are to a point that mid large military operation, 100% of the people are behind you, that's getting into a scary world.
Well, I'm utterly dying to process the events in Iran. I just don't feel comfortable doing it. And for our tens of listeners, the rationale and why I do not feel comfortable doing it has to do with U.S. service people in harm's way. So I don't feel we're at a particular point. Now, down the line, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whenever this comes to an end, we'll talk about this. But right now, I'm of the sense that it's not the right time
Yeah,
to.
I admire your optimism on that, but what I really look at though is that in a situation where something is being done that is 100% the opposite of what was being said,
Yes.
would not even lower an approval rating by 1%, 2%. That's not somebody who is oh, I like this president. That is somebody who loves this president. And maybe even so much that they would grab onto themselves whilst looking at a picture that he's in because there's another person in it who happens to be hot, but is it real? So, what does that tell you,
Who ends up
Robbie?
justifying their sexual attraction when in fact it's not AI created thing.
I will tell you, they're not looking at a fucking lamp sitting next to him and cranking one out, but there's no damn difference.
God, I don't even have a follow-up for that. You've nailed me. Let's circle back. I know we have another thing we want to talk about today, but you brought up an interesting point. The vehemence of the support that Donald Trump seems to engender. What's the psychological mechanism on that?
It's several things. It's not just one thing. I guess that's the tough part. I think it hits in a lot of different ways, but we live in a world now where we create our own echo chambers. We push particular narratives forward, so people are only hearing the things that they like.
Hmm.
The evidence previously had shown that people who did not read the news but got most of their news through social media were much more likely to be Trump supporters. You have several things happening, but also this kind of goes into cognitive dissonance. If any attack upon this person is an attack upon me and my personality and who I am, and so I'm going to support him even more. There's a point at which, and I think we've hit that, where you become so entrenched in this particular belief structure that any evidence against it turns into evidence for it. You absolutely will see this with doomsday cults, where they will absolutely know that the end of the world is coming on this particular day, and they will be there and be ready for it. And when that doesn't occur, rather than them sitting back and going, oh, it was all bullshit, I should carry on with my life. Instead, because it's psychologically too difficult to pull that together, they say that's further evidence to support whatever the belief structure is, because we must have done something to stop the end of the world. This is what I think I'm seeing now. I think there would be a big question about that. But once you get to a 100% approval rating from your fan base where you can literally do no wrong, I think you're getting into that territory. And I just don't have a way to say otherwise.
You're definitely getting in that territory, and it's the territory of conspiracy theorists, the psychological territory, at least. There's an old joke that I just adore, and I tell it way too much. A guy dies, goes to heaven, and he meets God. And God says, "Hey, welcome. Here's the thing I do. Every new person up here, I let you ask one question and give you the answer, the straight answer." And the guy asks about his particular conspiracy theory, and God, smiles and says, "Oh yeah, a lot of people believe in that. Just not true. It's just not a thing. I don't know where that got started. I don't know how it propagated. It's just not true." And the guy stands there, nods his head, and says, "Holy shit, this goes higher than I ever imagined." So, yeah, it almost ranges into, in our world, delusional disorder. That delusional disorders are interesting conditions in that they are not psychotic disorders. So, for our tens of listeners, a psychotic disorder is often associated with delusions, but it's also associated with a disorganization of thought, negative symptoms such as withdrawal, difficulty reading emotion, difficulty expressing emotion in a normal way. So those with psychotic disorders such as schizophrenia, they have a set of symptoms, one of which is often delusions, and sometimes they're paranoid delusions, or sometimes they're bizarre delusions. Aliens from Saturn have injected a microchip into my brain, or more often than not, the FBI, CIA has done that. Whereas delusional disorders and with psychotic disorders, they tend to have an onset for men on the average of age 19, for women somewhere around early to mid 20s. So they tend to have an onset earlier. And if you trace it backwards, there's a prodromal syndrome in which these individuals who end up developing these symptoms have an onset of symptoms earlier and a degradation in their function. Whereas delusional disorders, they tend to have an onset in middle life. These are individuals who are in their late 40s, 50s, early 60s, have lived a reasonably normal life, reasonably free of mental illness. And then all of a sudden, they develop this fixed delusion. And I'll use an example of, obviously without saying any names, but I once treated a woman. She was an administrator. She had her own office and she had her own staff. She walked into her office one day and she had some student workers. And we're talking back in the early days of cell phones. But she walks in, and two of her student workers are looking at a cell phone and they're laughing. She had never had this thought, but on that day, at that moment, she came to the conclusion that they were watching a video of her having sex. Why? I don't know. So she came to me. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I see all kinds of people. If you want to videotape yourself having sex, hey, whatever. Consenting adults do what consenting adults do. So, I'm like, so do you videotape yourself? Never. Okay. So the delusion ended up expanding from there, and that her husband was actually planting hidden cameras to videotape her. Is he a guy that would do that? Well, I wouldn't think so. Now, I started to actually think, maybe he did. I don't know. Ended up meeting with him down the line, and he's in tears. He loves this woman. They've spent a life together. And he's crying in my office saying, I would never, and I believed him. It didn't feel like like he was hedging on this one. At any rate, treated her. And interestingly, delusional disorders tend to be very, very resistant to medication treatment. But in her case, treated her within a week, disappeared. Her concerns disappeared. She came back. She was like, I don't know exactly what I was thinking. I remember it. I can think of it, but it's gone. I'm not worried about it anymore. So treated her for a couple of months, at which point she said, you know what? I don't want to take these medicines anymore. And I said, okay, how about this? We'll stop them and we'll set an appointment for a couple of weeks, see how you're doing. 2 weeks later, she comes back and she's like, there's videos of me on the internet. And I'm like, maybe we should restart this. And she said, I agree. At any rate, lost to time and follow up. I have no idea what ended up happening to her. But what this support reminds me of is that level of commitment to a belief structure, a fixed delusion. I don't want to call it a mental illness because ultimately I think it's more of a psychological phenomenon. But 100% support, it makes no sense. It's not human.
Well, a couple things. You described, actually, I think a really rare case. What you described is probably a case that is easily treated. It sounds like they're,
Maybe the only one in my career.
yeah, notoriously difficult to treat a delusional disorder. There's a great book, and I have a book, so go ahead and drink your water.
All right.
It's called Phantoms in the Brain by V.S. Ramachandran. And
Mhm.
it's actually a terrific book for, I think, every psych resident or every psychiatrist should probably read the book to get a better understanding neurologically why a lot of what we look at is just abnormal psychology tends to be more neurological issues, small strokes, things like that, in certain parts of the brain that can result in some of these conditions. But what we're seeing to this scale, I don't see it as that. What it looks more like is a confirmation bias with an exposure to more and more, I want to call it propaganda, but more and more information that aligns with a belief process that results in the illusory truth effect, where the more and more you hear something, the more true it becomes. I guess it functions like a delusional disorder, but it's not necessarily the same process that we classically think of that gets you there. I see it enough so it becomes true to me, and I only expose myself to things that agree with that truth to the point where it becomes my reality. Our brains are really incredibly complex, but not so complex that they can just do everything. And so the more that you hear something, the more true it becomes. And when you are surrounding yourself with that certain information, it will become your reality in spite of anything else that comes your way. And then you go out of your way to avoid, or as your brain does, your brain will, the book Phantoms in the Brain explains this beautifully with somebody who has a complete hemiparesis. So they're paralyzed on half their body. The brain doesn't understand that. And so when you ask the guy, can you raise your right arm? He's like, great, he raises his right arm. It's all fine. He'd raise your left arm. Nothing happens because he can't. And you're like, well, did you raise your left arm? He goes, yep. And that's just because
Hell yeah, I did.
internal. Yeah, yes, I did. Because your brain, once you've exposed it to something enough times that it becomes true, your brain can't tell the damn difference. If some information is presented that is contra to that, it's not going to accept it as reality. It's like telling somebody, yes, you can breathe underwater. Well, no, I can't. Yes, you can. No, I can't. It's not possible. And it's the
If you make a
same.
TikTok video, people
Yeah,
will
well,
start to,
there you go.
there will be a
Well,
rash of drownings around
there
the
would be,
nation.
yeah, if you made a video
Yeah.
that showed that, yeah, but this is
So
unfortunately, this is the world that we're living in, and as we've seen with Jessica Foster, the information not just
who doesn't exist, people? Just letting you know, she doesn't exist.
it doesn't matter at that point because even though, of course, a staff sergeant would never be in the Oval Office, a sergeant would never be
Wearing a
walking
mini skirt,
wearing a miniskirt, walking to the flight line with the President of the United States, wouldn't be doing any
wearing
of
a
these
mini skirt.
things. The reality is that that must be true because I want it to be. That sounds more volitional than than I intend it to be. It's not because I want it to be. It's because I've heard it so much that my brain knows that it must be true because my brain can't accept the alternative. which goes
Well,
into cognitive dissonance and everything else.
yeah, and we can go back in history and look at other cult of personality leaders, and I'm not gonna say any of them because none of them it will sound pejorative. It will sound like I've got an axe to grind, but there have been many examples of cult of personality type leaders. And the fascinating thing to me about cult of personality leaders is that on one end, they have a really strong personality. They have incredibly high personality needs in order to get to where they're at and the way they get there. But there's also an emptiness in their personality that allows the population to project their own personal needs into that space. And that personality somehow is able to hold them. So, for most of us, when an individual demands of us, projects upon us, it creates a great deal of anxiety in us. I'm sure our tens of listeners have had this experience where they've had a colleague, a work friend, someone they went to school with, another friend who ends up projecting so much onto them that it just makes them feel uncomfortable. It's not a good experience, and they can't keep it up. They can't hold it because their ego boundaries will not allow for it. They feel the wrongness of this. In somebody who has a certain personality structure that is so open and so in demand of adulation, of support, of reassurance constantly. So we're sitting at a very unique, and really in the history of the world, even though I can't come up with multiple examples, they're not that common. They really aren't. The commonness of this kind of cult of personality exacerbated by media internet zone that we live in which it allows for you to truly silo yourself into a certain echo chamber in which all you hear is what you want to hear. You really don't hear anything contra to what you want to hear. It is a truly a fascinating combination that leads to a 100% support that never has happened, never exists. Now, I guess I'm curious how they ended up separating out who is MAGA because I don't think there's 100% support. In fact, the polls
No, it's
very
not.
clearly
It's
say
yeah, it's not. It's not 100% support in the US. It's 100% among self-identified MAGA supporters. So somebody who says, "Yes, I am MAGA," also says, "And I love this guy." But the national approval is quite a bit different than that, even amongst Republicans. It's not that approval doesn't exist to that extent. But that's why it's so interesting because of who is saying and this level of support when even Reagan fans wouldn't have all said, I loved everything that he did. He was, um, no.
no, there would not have. So it's the nature of polls, I suppose. But there's a number of polls now looking at folks who identify as MAGA and the ones who tend to be America First MAGA. His support is slipping with them.
Well, what's interesting is that it's slipping with the war, still like 90% for the war. When asked, are you in favor of this war? 90% will say yes, 10% will say no. But if you say, are you in support of this guy? 100% are saying yes. Even though I don't support the war, I do support him. He's awesome and he's doing great.
That's fascinating.
It is really fascinating. It's mind blowing. Anyway, speaking of projection, because you brought it up, I got to address on Saturday, Robert Mueller, 81 years young, passed.
Yes, he did.
And what we got was a Truth Social Truth, was it?
Yeah, I think it was.
That said,
I'm glad he's dead. He will never be able to attack another innocent American.
it takes some, I don't know, to write, I'm glad
Chutzpah.
he's dead. I don't know about that. What I find interesting was that after the Mueller report had come out, Robbie, if I recall, the result of that was, at least what we were told, was that that's all, folks. It's all good. And I think he even said it exonerated him.
He said that.
Yeah, Trump said that. It exonerated him. What I find telling about it is just that if he holds this level of animosity to bother going on to social media to say, I'm glad the guy's dead. What did the Mueller report actually say that wasn't redacted that we didn't see that pissed him off so much?
I don't think it was the Mueller report. I think it was Mueller. He was a honorable man who was not beholden to public opinion, not beholden to public support. He comported himself as an honorable man even when he was being attacked. He kept his mouth shut. He didn't defend. He didn't do a goddamn thing. Even though he had lived an honorable life to that point. He didn't have to do this job. He could have denied it. He was the FBI director. He served honorably. He did his
Purple Heart
job.
from Vietnam. Yeah.
He had a Purple Heart from Vietnam, in which he had gone to Princeton. To our tens of listeners who maybe aren't read in on Mueller, he graduated from Princeton and then he volunteered for the Marine Corps to go to Vietnam, and he earned a Purple Heart in Vietnam.
Nothing wrong with his heels.
He didn't have bone spurs. He,
Oh,
he
weird.
went. Yeah, weird. He went. He was in a certain socioeconomic class that he could have dodged the draft, but he didn't. He didn't. He volunteered. He went to Vietnam. He earned a Purple Heart. And again, for our tens of listeners, Purple Heart means that you were injured in combat. I don't think this has anything to do with the Mueller report. I think this has to do with the reflection that comes from looking at yourself through the lens of another human. And that other human was actually an honorable, brave public servant who was looking for no adulation. He was not in the business of self aggrandizement. That's where I think the hatred comes from, because the Mueller report did not exonerate Trump, by the way. And in fact, in congressional hearings after the fact, even Mueller, who was about as neutral as he could possibly be, even though it won him no fans on the left, on the right. His stance was the Constitution says that you cannot charge a sitting president. That was the culmination of it. Here's all the data, here's all the evidence. You cannot charge a sitting president. They asked him directly, does this report exonerate the president? He said no. He didn't elaborate. He just said no. Now, who actually has read the full Mueller report? I have not.
No, I think that's the point, is that it was heavily redacted. A lot of the evidence that was in the report was not available to the public.
Yeah.
I think Bill Barr read it. He produced a one pager and said, this exonerates the president. I disagree with you that it was simply because Robert Mueller was a man who lived his life well. I think that if he said, Robert Mueller's dead, I'm glad, and left it at that, then I would agree with you. But the sentence, he can no longer hurt innocent people, means that he felt like he was attacked by Robert Mueller and that he is innocent, which he has consistently said 100% of the time he's done anything, that I'm innocent. And so I think he's pissed. I think he was pissed that Robert Mueller produced a report that said what he did and did not leave out anything that he did, and that he was honest in his report. I think if he's mad about honesty, it said he was honest about what was there. But I think he was pissed about the report because he didn't go in and kiss his ring and tell him that he was amazing and wonderful and special. And he didn't really do anything wrong when he did the things that were there. But we don't have access to it, and we probably won't ever.
Similar to how if he ever heard one of our podcasts, he'd hate us.
Yes,
Yeah, thankfully he has not. He doesn't have the attention span. But
it's a long hour, sometimes 40 minutes.
yeah,
We use big words.
he creates his own reality, and that's his superpower. He's shameless. What I was struck by, honestly, my gut instinct on this was just a few months ago when Charlie Kirk died, was assassinated. It became a national crime to talk about Charlie Kirk. And here we sit just a few months later, in which another man dies and he can disparage this man. Whereas just a few months ago, disparaging the death of somebody was truly a crime. And in fact, I was in
Well,
a position where I was actually engaged with an individual who got locked up in this because he had posted something about, hey, it sucks that Charlie Kirk for his family, but he said this, and this. And when the chickens come home to roost, this is the kind of thing that happens. Do I agree with that? As I said way back when Charlie Kirk was killed and we talked about it, no one deserves to die to speak their mind. No one. It's not a capital offense. In this nation, we should have freedom of speech, just like you and I are exerting right now as independent U.S. citizens, right? Donald Trump, we are independent U.S. citizens. We cannot be attacked for our
Well, I hate to
opinions
point
and
out,
thoughts.
and I'd hate to point out, it wasn't just people who were disparaging Charlie Kirk. It was people who were saying maybe very neutral things that just weren't nice,
Exactly.
and they were being attacked. But that's, I mean, that we spoke about before. That was the right wing hashtag Me Too. It was just a way to
Yep.
stick it to.
It brings me back to something we've talked about shamelessness. If history paints a single superpower that Donald J. Trump has, it's shamelessness. He is shameless. There is no need in his world to have internal consistency through time. He has no compunction about saying one thing, saying something completely different. The rest of us, 90% of human population, we feel compelled to be consistent. We feel like if we say X, then we have to live X and we have to say something consistent with X, which I think plays back into what you started with, which is why 100%? Well, because they said X and now they're ride or die. And Donald J. Trump is never ride or die. He's ride.
Yeah.
If the ride goes a different direction, he's more than happy to hop on a different motorcycle and be someone else's bitch.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's ride. It's just ride, and it's not jump on somebody else's. It's if somebody. It's just you jump on mine and you go whichever way I'm going, whenever I'm going there, no matter how I'm going there. Just be on board, or you're dead to me. Which I guess would be the die part. What's interesting about it is that it's not a personality trait that is exclusive to him, but you will find that people who lack that internal consistency, or actually I would say they don't lack it, they just don't need it. They don't find a need to stick with any kind of internal consistency.
It's rough to be internally consistent.
What's interesting about that is that because I'm sure all tens of our listeners have actually met people like this in their
Mhm.
life, and what's fascinating to me is that they tend to come in. And it's not the person. It's not the person that lacks that. It's the way that they either really disarm somebody because that lack of consistency is so confusing to somebody who does have it. Because if you're trying to empathize with somebody who lacks that, it just doesn't click in your own mind that they don't. And so wherever they go with the things that they're saying, because you are consistent in your own, and because it creates you a great deal of anxiety in yourself when you aren't able to be consistent with your own words, it is unfathomable for some people to believe that what that person is saying is anything but the truth. It doesn't really click. And what I find interesting is that that either leads to somebody who finds that very charming and charismatic, or incredibly off-putting. And it really doesn't seem to be either any other way. But when you have 100% of the people who are saying, yes, I believe you, it's because they find it charming.
I have often imagined what it would be like to be in the presence of our POTUS. And my speculation is that in the presence of our POTUS, when you are one on one with him, he is charming. I have no doubt.
If you agree with him, if he senses that what you are wanting to hear is something that he's willing to say, I imagine he's incredibly charming. But if you disagree with him, I imagine he is quite off putting if you don't agree
Well,
with what he's saying.
it depends if it's public or not.
Yes.
So a non-public exposure to him, I think he's charming. And I think he's probably much more flexible than he is in public. And I
Yes.
think his power is that, and this happens in folks who have a narcissistic bend, is that you're with me. And because you're with me and I'm so amazing, you must be amazing. And being made to feel amazing. I want everyone in our audience to think about those times in your life in which you're falling in love, you're in an environment where you're being like ultra appreciated. How amazing that feels to be I'm one of the best. I am amazing. I am fantastic. I am smart. I am good. All the things that we want to be. And I have a sense that because he is so convinced of his own amazingness, that those who he's with, it ends up being cast upon them. Here's where it gets wonky is that when you are included in that, for most of us, we feel obligated to consistency beyond that. So the promises made at those moments in time end up casting forward. And I speculate many of our politicians are stuck in this is that when they're by themselves being interviewed, they say one thing, then they come and have their audience with the king, and the psychological power that is exerted, all of a sudden the promise becomes to the king. And because humans are humans, because most of us, and when I say most of us, I mean a vast majority of us, want to be internally consistent, they end up making promises in that moment that they then feel compelled adhere to because they're not shameless. They're not shameless. They want to be honorable. Most humans want to be honorable at the level we can be. I mean, not everyone can be like Knights of the Round Table level honorable. I get that. I mean, that's the nature of being human. But we want to be honorable. And that's where he gets people. He really has to diverge significantly before they're willing to diverge significantly. And that's where we all get stuck.
I think you just described the salesman part of it. You just need to get somebody to say yes. Just keep plugging away. I think it goes deeper than that with him, but
You really need this.
oh,
You need this vacuum cleaner. You
yeah.
really need this vacuum cleaner.
And once somebody says, okay, they have a hard time turn around and say, no, I don't need a vacuum cleaner.
I have an interesting story about vacuum cleaners. Go figure.
I bet the story really sucks.
No, 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 no. This. I think that this might be Donald Trump in a nutshell.
Hit us.
But vacuum cleaner salesman shows up at the door,
What
and
fucking year? What era was
not
this?
not long ago. Not long
Okay.
ago. Yeah, I mean, we're talking within the last 5 years. Vacuum cleaner salesman, a rainbow vacuum cleaner salesman for our tens of listeners, if you wanna Google rainbow vacuum cleaners. They present themselves as friendly and ingratiate themselves into your life, and then hop in and they give you the demonstration, they do the things. Ultimately, even when you say no, there becomes a moral obligation to meet what they have invested. So if they have invested time in you, you feel like you need to invest time in them. You get to the point where you just can't say no. You just can't say no.
Why you have a really expensive vacuum, isn't it, Rob?
Well, I don't, but someone who used to be close to me does. And I heard this story and I remember thinking, "Holy shit, that's Donald J. Trump." That's what happens. That's the power he has, is once ingratiated, once the sense that they have invested in you, it is incredibly human that if we go backwards in time in our formative environment, if people invested in you, you invested in them, and there was a shared sense that that investment would pay off. In this environment, that's not the case. You can get dropped, and they often do. I mean, his allies get dropped fast and hard. In fact, I mean, Christy Nome should be the poster child for what's the benefit of being an ally? Not much. Not
No,
much.
she's now the leader of Shield. I mean, she's basically Nick Fury. So
She's a fucking Marvel character now. Yeah,
hey,
good
that's
for her.
there could be worse things. All right. I think we have squeezed as much as we can out of this one.
Way more than I thought.
Hey, me too.
You know, honestly, what it is that we had 2 weeks where we haven't chatted like this, and we just
Yeah.
like each other. He looks like Jessica Foster. Jennifer
Yes,
Foster?
yes, yeah. That's I want everyone when they hear my voice to picture Jessica Foster because that's basically what I
Yeah,
look like.
Jessica. He's an attractive 24-year-old looking
Yeah,
woman. Well, he's got an impressive rack.
that's right. I do. Robbie reminds me of a young Barbara Eden.
I dream of Genie, folks.
That's right.
Yep.
The young version.
Ridiculously specific. If Young was here, he would call you out on that. That's a very early exposure to I Dream of Genie, is what
Yeah.
that is.
Thank you, Nick and Knight.
You and Gilligan.
That's right. I have a prescription for anybody who has engaged in self love to a picture that Donald Trump was in,
That's love.
standing next to nobody. Just do a quick Google search. At least make sure that all the people in the picture are real. Otherwise, you're just stroking it to a lamp.
Was struck into the lamp. How do I top that? I don't. So I'm going to go serious. I'm going to say that my prescription is that we have to avoid being shameless. So if you take a stance, you have to hold that stance. And if you say criticizing the dead is verboten in the German, which I think is apropos, then you can't later flip around and embrace and celebrate the death of someone.
Seems fair. All right. Well, it was a long couple of weeks, but we are back. We'll keep trying to do this
As long as we can.
as long as we're allowed to. I think at some point we might get hauled off.
I'm still looking for ICE to show up outside, but I still think we're going to get deported.
I mean, being the young, attractive women that we are. All right. Thank you to everybody for sticking around. Hit like, subscribe, share with your friends if you can. Let's cue up that music. Now we're out.